Well, good morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the unapologetically progressive Sunday morning news and politics show for the Hoosier State. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I'm broadcasting from Bloomington. Behold our lovely new opening theme music credits, courtesy of our good friend Leslie Nuss. So, lots to get to this week. This regime has a funny way of dropping major news developments on us on a Saturday and throwing my script into a tizzy. Think of the podcasters, won't you, Don? Anyway, before we welcome our guest today, first, let me go ahead and ask for your support really quick. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall any of our content. We don't have advertisers. We don't have billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. It is a foundational principle of Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network that we refuse to hide valuable information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even if that's not in our financial best interest. So please, if you find value in this work, and it is a lot of work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And listen, if a paid subscription isn't in the cards for you right now, that's okay. You can still help out with your likes and your shares and your feedback and your comments. You get us when you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making this state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. You can follow me at Who's Left on most of your social media sites, and Progressive Indiana Network is the full spelled out name in most places, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, where you don't get that many characters, it's PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Tell the others. Let's build a radically democratic Indiana together. Now, let's welcome our guest today. A couple first-timers here on the Sunday morning show. Let's welcome first State Senate candidate up in District 21. There's Kirsten Root. Kirsten, welcome.
Thank you, Scott. It's so great being here.
Glad to have you. Tell the folks a little bit about yourself real quick.
Absolutely. My name is Kirsten Root. Thank you so much for pronouncing it correctly. I am a social worker up in District 21, so that is Westfield-Tipton-Kokomo, including all of Tipton County. And I'm just running to give back to the families and provide stability to the people who live here.
Well, thank you for running. Thank you for putting yourself out there. And thank you for being here with us today. Now, let's also welcome to the show, first time here on a Sunday morning, but a friend of the pod. There is Monroe County Councilmember and candidate for commissioner, David Henry. David, welcome.
Well, yeah, thank you for the welcome. Good to be a third time Who's Left, first time new format. I feel like at some point I should get a special blazer with like the number 5 club or something. I don't know where we're at on that, but great to be here. I am a Monroe County Councilor at Large in Bloomington. I was the former party chairman for the Democrats here for about 3.5 years. And been a rabble-rouser since 2016, so I'm glad to get into it today. Folks can find me at votedavidhenry.com as we're working to expect more out of Monroe County when it comes to our county commission moving into the years ahead.
Excellent, excellent. And I'll be keeping an eye on that as a Monroe County resident myself. So welcome to you both. Let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, man, just so much again this week. Let us drink from the fire hose together. And we're going to start on Tuesday with Trump's first official State of the Union of his second administration. So in a record marathon, hour and 48-minute long speech, the president bragged about the strong State of the Union and a booming economy, citing a high stock market, low gas prices, glossing over his low approval ratings on the economy, particularly on tariffs. He leaned into jingoism and reality TV spectacle, celebrating the gold medal-winning USA men's hockey team, handing out awards to soldiers, and using human props to highlight his pet culture war issues. He lied repeatedly, as he is wont to do, about inflation, economic growth, foreign investment, the illegal drug trade, gas prices, immigration, religion, elections, crime, energy production, and ending 8 wars. Now, that'll be ironic here in a second, as we see. Now, many Democrats skipped this event. The ones that did go, many of them remained seated for Trump's entire remarks. It seems the only time Democrats stood were for Trump's suggestion that we ban congressional stock trading, which I agree with, and also for some saber rattling at Iran. Now, put a pin in that. So let's start. Kirsten, did you watch this thing?
I did, unfortunately. I definitely feel like there were better ways I could have spent my time, but it's important to see these things to be able to hold people accountable in the future.
What stuck out to you?
I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me is exactly your list that you just had, just the continuous lies that were occurring and how much of it was a spectacle that was not focused on solutions at all. I grew up and Obama was my first president that I really understood what was happening and was like, this is what a president looks like. So to see that now in my late 20s, as this is what's representing our country, it's just embarrassing and really highlights how out of touch he is, because we're talking about the stock market while people are dying of hunger, lack of health care, and not able to buy groceries for their families.
Yeah, we're all struggling, the 90% of us who don't really have any stake in the stock market, but hey, it's at 50,000. David,
Yeah.
for as horrible as it was equally boring.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, because it turns out the 7th or 8th or 12th season of The Apprentice Washington D.C. edition is rather boring at this point. I mean, the people are saying the ratings. Look, the record length. I mean, the constant grabbing for the attention is just getting tired. Because I think, as Kirsten just said, look, people are hurting at home, and you can spin it any way you want, but there are more straw men in that speech nowadays than a hayride in the fall, and I think that's our real challenge. Is at what point are we going to have serious government again? Markets can go up, gas prices can go down, but it's kitchen table stuff, and it's more than just whether or not you got a stake in the stock market. Let's say you do have a 401k. Let's say you do have some pension wrapped up somewhere. You're going to burn it all at the end of your life when it comes down to life care, and more and more Americans are catching on that just like a Trump project that Trump America is just as shambolic as Trump stakes and Trump University at this point.
It's the whole thing was just, like I said, a waste of time.
Yeah.
2 hours. It was unnecessary.
Well,
you could have cut most of the thing. It was really 30 minutes worth of substance.
Where are the medals for the Democrats that had to sit through an hour and 48 minutes? That's what I want to know. I mean, if you're going to start handing out medals, make sure you do that too. I'm not talking participation trophies either. That's some serious pain.
Listen, if you take Stormy Daniels at her word, this is about the only time that Donald Trump will be accused of having record length. Now, let's move on. We mentioned Iran, and this, of course, is the biggest development this week, certainly, and in some time, I would say in general. So now, earlier in the week in Congress, Representatives Khanna and Massey introduced a war powers resolution, which would have forced a vote requiring congressional authorization for any attack. It didn't get there. We got the attack anyways. Now, reportedly, Democratic leaders had been trying to prevent such a vote to avoid going on the record. Why? Is it for fear of drawing the ire of the Israel lobby? This week, Axios reported that officials who worked on the unreleased 2024 DNC election autopsy found Kamala Harris lost significant support over the Biden administration's Gaza policy. The Democratic base has sympathized with Palestinians over Israelis for a long time, but this week, for the first time, a plurality of Americans share that sentiment, with 41% sympathizing with Palestinians versus 36% with Israelis in a new Gallup poll. Confusingly, one of the few people highlighting the depth of some U.S. officials' seeming loyalty to a foreign country over their own is right-wing pundit Tucker Carlson, of all people. Late last week, his interview with U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, made waves as the former Arkansas governor spoke of Israel's biblical right to the land, referred to the occupied West Bank as, quote, Judea and Samaria. He appeared to endorse Israeli expansion into neighboring countries. He defended his meeting with a man convicted and sentenced to 30 years for spying on the U.S. on Israel's behalf. And he said the IDF, which is accused by credible international organizations of genocide, was more humane than our own armed forces. Now, These changing opinions have not stopped U.S. officials from parroting Israeli talking points about Iran being a week away from nuclear bomb-making capabilities, a claim Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been making for 30 years now. And all the while, nuclear negotiations with the Islamic Republic continued all week, led by, among others, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. This is the same Kushner, mind you, who was named in conjunction with Iran in an intercepted cable between two foreign nationals that has been kept hidden from Congress in violation of the law by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard. Now, all of that culminating in yesterday's massive joint attacks on Iran by the U.S. and Israel, with the U.S. largely attacking military infrastructure and Israel going after leadership, including the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and the compound of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Now, Netanyahu, then Trump, announced that the Ayatollah had been killed in the strikes, which Iran denied for hours before later confirming the Supreme Leader's death. With several other high-ranking Iranian officials killed in the strikes, it is unclear who's really in charge of the country. The president, Pezeshkian, is still alive. Now, Iran lobbed missiles and drones at Israel and U.S. allies in the Persian Gulf, including Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Most of these attacks were intercepted, but limited damage was reported. Trump called on Iranians to take over their government, even as strikes are expected to continue for days or even weeks. Kirsten, where to even begin? Thoughts on this attack on Iran? I mean, they've been telegraphing this thing for some time. It seems you knew it was coming. I mean, the neoconservatives have been parroting war with Iran for decades now, it seems.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying that war powers belong in Congress, right? It's kind of crazy that this is even a talking point right now when we have been working so hard to say that we are against war, and Donald Trump is claiming that he is like bringing peace to our country and just saying that he ended 8 wars and then starting one, right? And it just happens to be after the release of the Epstein files, of course, and while everybody's demanding accountability, and none of it's a coincidence. We are at a point in time where we need to be asking not only Republicans, but also our Democratic leaders why we're allowing these things to happen and holding people accountable across the board. I think my biggest concern right now is if this is going to cause any impact on the midterm election. I know that's something that's been brought up at several forums that I've been a part of. And I think it's a time where it's really important that we're just paying attention and asking more questions along the way.
David, your initial thoughts?
Oh, there's so much. I mean, but let's just start with the Orwellian "war is peace" line. I mean, it's like 1984 is the handbook of the current administration. Look, I mean, there's so much to unpack with what's going on in Iran, and maybe I can put on my professor hat where I teach Homeland Security at IU a little bit. You can be both anti-war and anti-regime, and I think what we're seeing is a split now where people are anti-regime and are maybe willing to get saber rattling in a bipartisan way. But what does that say for those that have long believed that the soft power solutions in the Middle East are what work best? I mean, this is not a time for sharpening very long grievances. The Middle East conflict has very long teeth and very long memories, and it's not just Abrahamic religions pounding on each other. These are also ethnicities. And we just saw it. I mean, the antipathy of Iranians toward not just Israel, but all allies on the Arab Peninsula was shown with missiles being lobbed into Dubai and Bahrain, because the Iranians, the Persians, have long considered the Saudis, their slang term for them are snake eaters. I mean, there's ethnic conflict in that region that I don't think MAGA hat wearing Americans in southern Indiana really understand. But all they see is it's back to the desert like we did in 91 and 2005. And that's a challenge. I mean, another challenge too is I don't think Americans realize how big Iran is. It's the size of California with a population about the same size. I mean, these are not small places, and we don't need we're always 1 week from nuclear war. We've been 1 week from nuclear war with them since the Reagan '80s when I was growing up watching that State of the Union. Conventional war is hell too. And if we get into that space in a hurry, I think we're going to find that this will be Trump's Vietnam. I mean, and that's really all there is to it. So we got to cool this off and get back to the table. But we don't have those players in government right now, and that's where this is our real challenge. Real challenge.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's made up of a bunch of. I guess what's the angle? Is it the religious extremists who want like a new crusade in the Middle East? Is it about oil? Is it is it about other things? Kirsten, David mentioned this that Iran is the size of California. It's like something like I want to say 6 times the size of Iraq. I could be wrong on that number, but that didn't exactly go great. We thought we were going to, walk in there and be greeted as liberators, and we got bogged down, and you got ISIS that came out of all that. What are we doing here? You can cut off the head of the snake, right? But you cannot truly affect change just through bombing, through aerial war. If they want to, like, quote unquote, take over the country, that's going to involve boots on the ground. I don't think anybody wants to see that.
No. And I think this is a really good opportunity for us to demand that our government focus back on domestic issues, because right now we have so many things going on, and we're saying that we can't afford to take care of people. We're cutting childcare vouchers. We are doing things that are harming our citizens. Meanwhile, we're throwing billions of dollars at a war that we just frankly shouldn't be a part of. And I think right now, as individuals, it's important for us to remember that, to focus on helping people, and to also focus on taking care of people and not feed into the rhetoric. People who are Islamic or Jewish in our communities, I think it's an important time for us to step up and still make sure we're protecting them and not feeding into any harmful things that are coming out of everything going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that counts for our Senate leadership too. I mean, Todd Young has been particularly bad on this point, because this is a person who will, dalliance with the authorization of use of military force. He's said he's wanted to co-sponsor things with Senator Kaine from Virginia to curtail executive power. And then once President Trump starts pulling the feathers out of Todd Young's bed, he sings a different tune in a hurry. That's a real shame. But as a Marine, Senator Young should be ashamed of that. My grandfather was a Marine, World War I. And when that man looked me in the eye and shook my hand and told me what he was going to do, he said what he meant. And that's something Senator Young needs to own for our state. You can't have it both ways with this. But that saber rattling, Scott, I mean, that's an old story. Gore Vidal used to say that we had one party, and it was a war party of 2 factions. And when we get into this space, people need to take a big step back and think about what they're committing people to. Kirsten's right. It's taking working class Hoosiers, putting them in uniforms and sending them abroad for something that nobody understands right now. So dial down the wattage. It's probably too late when you assassinate a head of state like that. And I'm hoping for cooler heads here.
Yeah, so what? We're just we're kidnapping and assassinating heads of state now. That's just how we roll in Trump too.
Well, I mean, I don't want to hog this, but think about it. We've sent a message to other countries that that's something we do now. And how long does Russia take until they start doing this to Ukraine? How long does China take until they start doing this to Taiwan? How long does others start looking at us, the same way? This was a crossing the Rubicon moment in the past year, and I don't think we even begin to understand how bad this is going to look in the world.
No.
I'm just Kirsten. Will our new Canadian overlords please remove rid us of this meddlesome regime?
Can only dream. We can only dream at this point.
So, listen, a lot of this, you hear people online saying this whole Iran thing is a distraction from the Epstein files. That's a hell of a distraction. So now this week, police in Britain arrested former ambassador to the U.S., Peter Mandelson, and released him on bail. This was on suspicion of sharing sensitive government financial information with the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. Like the former Prince Andrew, Mandelson was not arrested for alleged sexual improprieties. However, unlike Andrew, he does maintain his title of Lord. Now, new details this week were also released regarding Howard Lutnick's relationship with Epstein. Now, back on our side of the pond, consequences remain scarce, but Lutnick, however, is beginning to come under further scrutiny after earlier stating that he had cut ties with the disgraced sex trafficker in 2005. New information has shown the billionaire financier visited Epstein's private island in 2012, signing a business deal just days later. Epstein donated $50,000 to a charity dinner in Lutnick's honor in 2017, and the two communicated via email as late as 2018. Now, Trump's allies in Congress tried to pin some accountability on the Clintons, with former First Lady, U.S. Senator, and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton deposed for hours of closed-door testimony Thursday, and the former president taking his turn Friday. The Clintons had sought to testify publicly to avoid having selective portions of their testimony leaked without context, submitting to the Oversight Committee's demands under threat of contempt of Congress charges. Now, a picture of Hillary Clinton testifying was leaked by Colorado Representative Lauren Boebert. She got in trouble for that, for violating House rules. Now, both the Clintons denied having any knowledge of Epstein's crimes, with Bill saying he had stopped associating with the late pedophile well before his first conviction on sex crimes in 2008. Democrats say Clinton's testimony sets a precedent, however, that should apply to the current occupant of the White House, whose name appeared in the Epstein files a hell of a lot more times than Clinton's did. We also learned this week that Epstein kept several storage units across the U.S. and paid private detectives to remove computer equipment from his Florida home after being tipped off about an impending police raid. Warrants reviewed by the Telegraph out of the UK suggest authorities never searched these units, which may explain the relative dearth of compromising material we have seen compared to what Epstein is rumored to have collected. Now, just as Epstein is now suspected of having removed evidence of potential crimes, Trump's DOJ is also now suspected of having willfully withheld files related to allegations against the president leveled by a woman who says Trump sexually and physically assaulted her when she was a minor in the early 1980s. These allegations were credible enough that the FBI interviewed the woman 4 times, though only one of the interview transcripts, which conveniently does not mention Trump, was released. This discrepancy was uncovered by an independent journalist and later verified by NPR. The DOJ has repeatedly taken down and put back up various documents related to Epstein, doxing survivors, redacting the names of conspirators, and overall engaging in sloppy investigative work. Kirsten, do you buy that the Iran attacks are a distraction from Epstein? It's my conjecture that the Epstein stuff is frankly a distraction from all of the fascism.
So I would agree with the last thing that you said, that the Epstein stuff is a distraction from fascism, but I feel like those still go hand in hand. I would also agree that Iran is a distraction from Epstein. It's just when you're dealing with somebody who's a narcissistic liar, they're just constantly building on lie after lie and trying to do the thing that they think is going to keep themselves safe. It doesn't matter the impacts that it has on our communities or communities abroad. I've worked in child safety for several years, investigating child sex abuse and physical abuse, all the things. And if I ever had a level of this, I would be taken to court so quickly and lose my job, because that's what should be happening. So the fact that these things aren't occurring now at our highest levels of government is irrepressible.
Yeah.
David, thoughts? I think Kirsten mentioned that these things sort of go hand in hand, right? It's like, well, is this a distraction from the one, or is or vice versa, or is it just, this is just elite criminal impunity all across the board?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go at it the way my brain does, like 5 different angles here. So, I think, to me, I think Steve Bannon told us this years ago. The whole point is to fry the system with as much lateral information as you can. I don't know if it's one or the other; it's all the things, And so, it's hard to say what are we trying to hide this week, right? Wag the Dog came out when I was in college. It was a great movie. It was not a documentary. It was a drama. It was a farce about Clinton and Kosovo. I don't know if Trump and Iran is the same. It's like, again, another great film, Groundhog Day. We're just going to do this all over again. But I think what matters to me today is, as a Monroe County human and an Indiana human, about the way that people absorb this at a local level. Folks that are in the mega big box churches this morning are having a very massive blind eye to this. And it is the Lenten season, and I'm thinking about the Beatitudes, and I don't remember the one that says, "Blessed are the pedos." And there's something about this that should have some cognitive dissonance. People in my community say they're tired, they're worn out by having these conversations. It's just too much noise, and there's 2 ways to go at it. You can just ignore it with your privilege and say, la la la, it's not happening because I still get to go to the country club, or you can actually have these conversations like we're having today. But in Bloomington, we've had some challenges. So we had a professor at Kelly School of Business at IU that was arrested for child porn charges or child exploitation charges. And so if permission comes from the top, I mean, if the president of the United States and Jeffrey Epstein and this class have that level of get away with it, what does that say to the guy in a rural space that can get away with it? I mean, the permission has been given from the top. We have to step down on this. We have to clamp down on this. And I'll just say one last point. I mean, and this is not a partisan comment. I mean, I do think this is a class comment. We're talking about a bourgeois versus proletariat problem. And so this is a progressive podcast. So let's talk about it because, yeah, if you were a local person and you get caught doing this, like you expect justice like a hammer to come down on that person. At the national level, I guess if you're in the right social class, the rules don't apply. Rules are for other people. That sounds like another George Orwell piece. That's Animal Farm, and we're right into it. So there's a lot going on here, but like the national issues become local issues in a hurry when we look past this behavior.
Yes. Some animals are more equal than other, right? Go ahead, Kirsten.
Can I add on to that too? And I think this is a message to victims too, that you can come forward and you can do everything right. And that doesn't matter. And that's already something that we struggle with our local law enforcement and with our local communities when we have teenage girls coming forward and accusing teachers, family members, whoever it is. And they are getting away with these things because we are just putting this blind trust in people who we should be expected to feel safe with and be able to feel like our children are going to be safe with. In communities like so I worked in Hamilton County DCS just as a frame of reference, and families in areas like Carmel would frequently get away with things like this because they could afford the best attorney and they had the time to spend on it. So these things are already happening at the local level, and we're just seeing it on a national level that I think is bringing this to the forefront of conversations.
And, David
Scott, I just want to
mentioned
take a shot at
Steve Bannon,
go ahead,
right?
Go ahead.
And Bannon is also implicated in these Epstein files. Yes. They were very close, and they were speaking right up until Epstein's arrest, I understand. And man, like the whole flooding the zone thing, Epstein's had his fingers in all of the different threads that are coming together now in terms of like right-wing influence operations and like the manosphere and Gamergate, crypto. Yeah. And he was early on all that stuff. And you wonder if that's related to where we're at now.
Yeah, I was gonna hop in ahead of you. I'm glad you framed it up. I mean, I'm gonna go back to the international conversation, even though I'm just a lowly Monroe County, counselor, because I think that the spread internationally is what's interesting. And Bannon had his fingers in international stuff too. I mean, I de-stress by reading British news. I probably need a better hobby, but we're in this like ridiculous position where we're now taking moral cues from the British royal family about the right thing to do, and Charles III, who one of my favorite authors, Christopher Hitchens, used to call the Prince of Piffle, is now leading the global moral outrage, where the Andrew, formerly known as Prince, has been thrown out of the family and been put into the gallows here, and is under investigation. If only we had that level. It's almost like the musical Hamilton was right. Like maybe we need to go back and borrow some of this a bit. But goodness, where are we as a culture? But I guess it comes down to golden rule, right? And it's not the one we all know. It's the one that he who owns the gold makes the rules. And we really have to change that. That's the 21st century.
Ain't that the truth? So listen, I want to pivot to our next story here. And, we mentioned the sloppy investigative work done by the DOJ. Well, speaking of sloppy, at the FBI, the principal law enforcement agency under the DOJ umbrella, Director Kash Patel was sloppy drunk on the job last week in Milan. Up top, I mentioned the gold medal-winning U.S. men's hockey team, their first gold since 1980, by the way. Well, Patel joined the team in the locker room after the game, celebrating by drinking himself cross-eyed with the boys, though sources say that's just the way he looks. His very presence at the Olympic Games once again brings into question Patel's personal travel habits, especially as FBI officials were investigating an armed man who was shot and killed by the Secret Service after breaching the perimeter at Mar-a-Lago that same morning. Now, as an aside, even as Carolyn Levitt tried to blame the left for the breach, it turns out the man who breached the perimeter was a MAGA Trump supporter who became fixated on the Epstein cover-up. Now, back to Patel. He says he was in Milan on business, meeting with security officials tasked with protecting U.S. athletes on the final days of the 2-week-long games. But Patel's jet setting is a long-running scandal with the director crisscrossing the country on trips that have little apparent law enforcement purpose. It's not just a waste of money. Patel's overuse of the Bureau's private jets is interfering with the agency's work. This week, we learned the investigation into Charlie Kirk's assassination was delayed by at least a day because planes that should have been at agents' disposal were unavailable. Likewise, the Bureau's response to the Brown University shooting in December was similarly delayed. Kirsten, doesn't this guy have anything better to do than go, drink beer in the locker room with the boys? Like, there's major crimes happening here. You're the director of the FBI. You should be looking into your boss.
You would think that would be the expectation at this point, right? I don't see the chief of Westfield PD flying over to Milan and using our SUVs to go on whatever trip he wants to do. I mean, exactly what you said. It's a waste of taxpayer funds, but it also is telling everybody here that the crimes that are occurring don't matter. They're not that serious, because if they were, we would be taking them seriously, right? I mean,
well,
it's
one
just
would think.
you would think. And if we're just spending taxpayer monies to go overseas and go on vacation instead of doing what we need to be doing and keeping people safe, it's just doubling down on exactly what we were saying earlier, that our victims and their lives don't matter.
And David, now, like I mentioned, Kash Patel's job should be to investigate crimes here, including his boss as well. He's there specifically to cover for Trump, is he not?
Yeah. I mean, he like a lot of the appointees at the top are human wrecking balls through the bureaucracy, and in some ways, this is where I get a little stoic to say. I mean, we already knew the story was going to play out on election day. Yeah, the shock value of hearing these stories, it's what grabs the headlines, but what doesn't grab the headlines is what's underneath and what it's doing to the national security structure of our country. The Bureau, Department of Homeland Security, any agency engaged in this runs on discipline. It runs on credibility. And so when your leadership's distracted and absorbing all that from the top, and it's a similar story with Kirsten at DHS, treating the assets of their agencies as personal aircraft, that response times decline, credibility, discipline declines, morale declines. Our national security is not a frequent flyer program for elites. It is designed to get the job done. And so that means at the tail end here, it's not just the victims you know about today, but the countless cases that are piling up victims that are not going to get justice. So it's the fraying of the whole system underneath it. And so to all those people that are in civil service that are just trying to do their job, thank you for persevering, but it is getting harder and harder and harder when we hear about stories like this.
Yeah, like you said, think of the stories that we're not hearing about, right? If they're dropping the ball in the Charlie Kirk investigation and this Brown University investigation, what else, or what are we not hearing about, right, Kirsten? Right. It's probably the kind of stuff that you were covering in Hamilton County at the DCS.
Absolutely. And it's frustrating because we see these things happening, but then at the same time, we're being told we don't have the funds to get like a domestic violence victim out of their home or to take care of people who are in real dangerous situations. We're told we don't have that money to go on our rape backlog kits, but yet we have funds for things like this. We have time to do all of those things, but we don't have the resources to take care of the people who are really struggling here at home.
Yeah, it's incredibly disappointing. So listen, I've got a whole section here where we're going to talk about the various ways the Trump regime is using the levers of power to pressure every aspect of the system. So, for example, let's turn from law enforcement to the judiciary, where the Trump regime has used the courts as an extension of executive power. Now, first, a couple of positive developments on this front. In the case of 6 Democratic lawmakers who filmed a social media video reminding U.S. troops of their duty to disobey illegal orders, Jeanine Pirro, former Fox News personality and current U.S. attorney for D.C., this week gave up on efforts to indict them after failing to secure an indictment from a grand jury. Now, still, the very fact that Pirro was pursuing charges demonstrated selective political retribution by Trump's lackeys. Similarly, in January, the FBI seized devices and materials from a Washington Post reporter in relation to a leak of sensitive defense information by a government contractor, causing concern that the feds had access to all of her confidential sources for all cases, not just the one in question. Now, this week, a judge rescinded the administration's ability to examine the data, though. Do you trust they haven't illegally copied everything already? Now, as that federal judge was limiting the administration's ability to violate the freedom of the press in South Florida, Donald Trump's concierge judge Aileen Cannon was limiting our ability to know the extent of the president's crimes, permanently barring the release of special counsel Jack Smith's final report detailing Trump's classified document hoarding problem. David, here we are. We see the Trump administration abusing the court system in just these few examples, but it goes far deeper.
Yeah, this is a whole podcast by itself. I'm going to try to do this in like a second, but I mean, let me start with the lessons we can learn, I think, here from what we're seeing up there. They have the six senators that called out the duty to the Constitution, that we have to uphold the Constitution. We need to learn from that here in Indiana. As you know, my county is the only one in Indiana that's going to be suffering the brunt of Senate Bill 76, where we're going to see a county sheriff that has been opposing cooperating with ICE and Todd Rokita coming to Bloomington to try to make a stink out of it. I mean, a number of elected officials here have said basically the same thing that Elise Slotkin did, which is, I took an oath of the Constitution. I'm not violating the due process rights of anybody. There's a Bill of Rights in there. This is going to have to go to court. And that message needs to get loud and clear from my community. I mean, a number of us are ready for it. When it comes to trying to leverage the judicial system to get your way and then just keep finding courts. I mean, I think the good news is things are still holding up. And that's and even when the court, with the tariffs, the Supreme Court with the tariffs, which I'm sure we'll get into. There matters too. But I will tell you, on the national security front of those files, it's always bothersome to me. I held a security clearance for a bit. If I had one document in my house, I would have been thrown in jail for it. The fact that how this gets looked past is remarkable, and I think we're going to be talking about this for a generation, about the incredibly gross violations of our national security and being kept in a bathroom in Florida by the box load.
I'm going to make the joke that is an exceptionally gross violation.
Yeah. Yes, at all. So that's just some hot takes there, but boy, we could do a whole show just on that.
Yeah, and listen, so it's not just the courts, right? It's also through the economy, right? Trump's using economic levers to his own benefit, right? The administration, in addition to abusing the courts, abuses their power through the economy, with Trump threatening countries to abide by his tariffs, even though the Supreme Court last week struck down most of his import taxes. At Tuesday's State of the Union address, he publicly criticized judges for that decision, even as a new 10% global tariff went into effect following an executive order he signed allowing him to bypass Congress. Still, companies continue to sue the government, looking for a refund of the money they paid in duties that the court has ruled illegal. This week, FedEx joined other firms like Costco in seeking relief from these tariffs that Trump unilaterally imposed last year. Now, Kirsten, I bet as you're in your district talking to folks about the affordability crisis, things are more expensive. Are people connecting that it's tariffs that are having a large effect on the affordability problem?
I'm seeing mixed responses. I would say in spaces that are primarily progressive, those lines are absolutely being drawn. But I think in the areas where people are working 2 jobs, 80 hours a week, doing the best they can, they don't have time to sit here and try to draw these connections. They're just trying to get through the week. So they're continually being lied to and trying to keep up with it. But it's impossible at this point for people to have the time to really understand these things. And it gives us as leaders an opportunity to really step in and educate them as we're running for office, as we're in the communities having conversations. I think it gives us an opportunity to help them understand these things in language that is able to be understood versus trying to say it the smartest way we can, right?
Yeah.
And
so I mean, it's remarkable. Yeah.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, the courts now agree with what the economists have been saying for a while, and frankly, even like libertarians and economic conservatives, right? Club for Growth, Grover Norquist, like the Trump tax tariffs are paid by Americans, and it may take, I think in our districts and our neighborhoods, maybe it's a $20 Happy Meal before the red hat people catch on. Maybe it's something they care about, like imported truck nuts, or I don't know, made in China Trump gear that they realize has gotten so expensive, right? I mean, but at what point is that money slipping out of their wallet and they realize, hey, wait a minute, something's not right? I mean, we know that, families absorb it. The cost of supply chain passes it forward right down to Bloomington's, Kroger, and Target, and everything, and Walmart. So it's like, how do you break up that norm? How do you tell that? You just have to keep telling that story. And the boogeyman, they're always looking for boogeyman in the bureaucracy, and it's always some bureaucrat that's the problem. No, this stinks from the top. And when I think about it, it just bleeds into everything into our healthcare systems, our appliances that we buy. Look, that's part of the story. It hasn't quite hit the wallet yet, but it's reminding people why things are as expensive as they are. When you're doing your weekly groceries and your small purchases, it's the Trump tariff tax. It's been known since the beginning.
Everybody knows the best truck nuts come from Malaysia, of all places. Listen. In addition to the courts, in addition to the economy and the tariffs, the administration is also continuing to shape the information space, using their regulatory levers to put their thumbs on the scale to ensure regime allies control the media. As Netflix and Paramount traded bids in an effort to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery, Trump demanded Netflix fire board member Susan Rice, a former Obama and Biden advisor, apparently at the behest of right-wing conspiracy theorist Laura Loomer. Now, in addition to pressuring the Netflix board, Trump's DOJ also reportedly flexed its muscle behind the scenes, threatening to make the merger difficult while promising smooth sailing for Paramount's bid. Thursday, Netflix pulled out of negotiations, clearing the way for the Ellison family, major Trump allies, to acquire the Hollywood giant Warner Brothers. Now, Oracle founder Larry Ellison acquired TikTok earlier this year, and his son David purchased Paramount last year. Both media entities have tacked heavily rightward since, particularly at CBS, which is under the Paramount umbrella. In the potential Warner Brothers acquisition, in addition to the antitrust concerns, is troubling because some of the equity backing the bid comes from sovereign wealth funds of Gulf monarchies. Kirsten, the media is increasingly becoming an arm of the government, at least major parts of it, right? You got CBS. If this thing goes through, you're looking at CNN as well, and HBO and Comedy Central, which have prominent Trump critics in their comedy spaces. This is in addition. Obviously, you got Fox and that entire conservative media sphere. The place where you can get real, honest news is gradually shrinking and shrinking and shrinking.
It is. And I could be mistaken. I thought that we had freedom of press in the Constitution. I don't remember when that was removed. I must have missed that news day. But we recently had a trip overseas, and a big thing that was being discussed while we were in Europe was, what does your guys' media look like at home? So while we were there, we were looking at newspapers. We were grabbing books that we knew we could buy at home to sit down and look at. What does this look like side by side? And even just looking at the basic daily news, I'm pulling up CNN on my phone. I'm pulling up Al Jazeera, just like, what do these look like overseas? And the headlines are vastly different. And there is a continual input of, what's it like being in a fascist country at this point? We were at a dog park in Ireland, and somebody asked us, how are you guys doing living in fascist America? What is that experience like? And the fact that that's a dog park conversation over there, but something that we're denying here in major media outlets, is extremely concerning.
Now, David,
Yeah.
I hear Kirsten's concerns, and I think we're going to be in this place like we talked about Bannon and flooding the zone, right? Like, it's not going to be a thing where, we don't have the freedom of speech. There's going to be so much disinformation you can't separate truth from fact.
Yeah, there's a lot here, and my brain goes to, well, what's the counter, right? Because you can make an argument and say, well, it's just all over because that one killer app gets you Amazon Prime for all time, right? I think the way to think about it is this: the fact that we're even on today is hope for the First Amendment, right? So we're not at a point yet where Aaron Rodgers is getting shut down. I guess that's the day I start to really worry. My students in my classes have started to use they talk about the post-internet world. I mean, these are Gen Alphas, Gen Zs. They're talking about the post-internet world, which tells me that a lot of people just don't get their news from CNN the way they used to. It's scaring the boomers from 8 to 10 o'clock at night. But a lot of us, I think, to Kirsten's point, we consume information everywhere. I mean, I read international news as well as local news. I read hyper local news by local bloggers that are covering my local beat. It's teaching the people to get very eclectic about how they put their news together, because your one newspaper doesn't do that for you anymore. And I think high info consumers are like that. It's the ones that we worry about, right? That are only getting that algorithm tap where they're shown only one thing that we're concerned about. But look, ever since the beginning of the Republic, we've had partisan newspapers, partisan competition for ideas. I think those of us that grew up, in that 20th century, late 20th century piece, started to see maybe a more homogenizing or moderating of that. But we might be going back to something that's more akin to 1820 or 1920, where if you buy the partisan newspaper for the partisan view, but it's your friends and neighbors that tell you what the word on the street is. It's just we're in a disruption period. That's my crystal ball on it. That gives me a grain of hope. But boy, if they cancel Who's Left, I think then I know I got a problem.
Right. Yeah. I'm very, very, very small fish in the grand scheme of things. But listen, here's a big fish that they're coming after, and this one's particularly scary, I think. So beyond traditional studios and social media, the administration is picking sides in the AI space, with the Pentagon the scene of this fight. Pete Hegseth, the self-styled Secretary of War, and senior military leaders have been pressuring artificial intelligence firm Anthropic, maker of the Claude AI model, to allow the Pentagon unfettered use of its capabilities, including for mass surveillance of Americans and fully autonomous weapon systems that could kill without human input. Dystopian, man. Anthropic, which has a reputation as the most safety conscious of the AI companies, refused the demands, with CEO Dario Amodei saying the company cannot in good conscience accede to their request. In response, Trump ordered all federal agencies to stop using Anthropic tools, and Hegseth deemed the company a supply chain risk, a designation usually only applied to foreign adversaries. So into the void steps Elon Musk's XAI, who reached a deal allowing the Pentagon to use its Grok model in classified system. This is the same Grok who was calling itself Mecha Hitler at one point last year, I believe. And Friday, hours after Anthropic was blacklisted, OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, also agreed to allow the military access to its services for, quote, any lawful use. Well, I mean, Kirsten, the regime can deem just about anything lawful at this point, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing that through our judicial systems. We're seeing it through our legislative systems. We are at a point where when all sections of the government are taken over by the same regime and backing each other, it doesn't really matter what's lawful anymore. But there is hope. I think what David said earlier, like there is hope in certain things that we are seeing, with like the Supreme Court pushing back and denying certain things. We are starting to get an understanding. So I'm hopeful that our leaders and Supreme Court do push back against these things once it does get to court.
Now,
Yeah.
David, you handle like national security and public
I have in the
safety and
past.
that sort
Yeah.
of thing. AI, you probably didn't study that when you were taking on your training, did you?
No, not at all. And this is another classic case of the technology getting ahead of regulation, the technology getting ahead of the law. And so when we turn the battleship of our judicial system around, by the time we get there, this is a very fast moving challenge. And so, the problem is the Silicon Valley getting a backdoor into the Pentagon. And once that stuff goes into the cloud and that data migrates, we've got some serious challenges there. With friends like these, who need enemies like China at this point, because it's all in house. But so it's getting us back to a place where the public interest is even able to talk about these things, and getting out of this like reflex toward the kleptocracy that's sort of developing. But my hope is that if we survive the next 3 years of this, for the contracting class, maybe it'll be the rest of my career. This will be a generational career to put the government back together and get regulations around this. I don't feel like at this point we know enough other than that initial reporting, but the picking and choosing of what players get to be in the Pentagon space, it feels differently when it's It's not building a battleship that goes out into the ocean, right? It's inside the country, and that firewall that protects us from things like well, it's almost like the Quartering Act, right? It's like the Third Amendment rights of keeping the government out of the military out of my bedroom. Is really kind of where we're at with this. It's just it's area of law that is just it's going to be messy, and I know that's not a I have no joke about that. Like I can't really make a joke about this. This is probably the most serious thing we're talking about today from my seat, among all the serious things we're talking about today. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you mentioned it's going to take a generation to put this thing back together. We're going to have to tear this thing down to the studs and rebuild, and that's going to take good people who, we assume will be elected to office to do that thing. Well, are we going to be able to elect them? So perhaps the most concerning application of pressure from this regime would be on our election systems. And the Washington Post reported this week that far-right activists in the Trump orbit are circulating a 17-page draft executive order that would declare a national emergency and give the president unprecedented power over the nation's voting, based on a claim that China interfered in the 2020 election. The plan would mandate all voters re-register with strict voter ID and proof of citizenship, ban mail-in ballots, and label voting machines as vectors of foreign interference. Kirsten, how the hell? I mean, number one, this is scary, and this is obviously unconstitutional. But we've ceded so much power to the executive over the last several generations that this is even a possibility. How are you supposed to campaign for office in this environment where you're not even sure if free and fair elections are going to take place?
And that's the question. When I first met my campaign manager to interview and talk about what we were going to do, that was the question: was how are we going to campaign while supporting still having this free and fair election? Because what's the point of campaigning if we can't get elected? And there have been a lot of conversations around advocacy and education. So our biggest goal in our campaign has been to just educate people around the rights they have, the laws that they are able to utilize to continue to push for a free and fair election. We've been involved in several school walkouts at this point, and that's been really encouraging because our youth they care and they're seeing this, and it's very disheartening though as a candidate to see everything going on. But even on the local level, we're seeing concerns as we're trying to get rid of early elections and taking away those rights.
Yeah,
David, I want to tie. Well, here, let me set you up. I want to tie this
there's a
back
lot.
to the Iran stuff. And as soon as those attacks happened yesterday, I was like, okay, great. They're going to be their pretext for canceling the elections or putting some form of executive order in place to limit voting in some way.
Yeah. Let me try to put on some other hats. I was an election board president for a bit in Monroe County, and I'm also a candidate. And I think in some ways I process what I'm hearing through sort of Republican classic versus whatever this new Republican is, if we're going to use soda analogies. Republican classic's more into curtailing early voting. It's more into not doing vote centers in Indiana, for example, or some counties like Monroe County. We've had a vicious fight over vote centers and access to the ballot, and that feels like Republican classic to me, right? Like it's this new Republican idea or this whatever we're calling this, that there's this
Baja Blast Republican, yes.
Yeah, which seems to like just ignore the federalism thing. I mean, we used to have governors who would claim states' rights and scream that to the rooftops, 50 state sovereigns. That's like, it's almost like when election law is really local like that. Like, I mean, I think counties are going to have to step up and say, you can write all the emergency declarations you want, but I don't see an insurrection. I don't see the president trying to assert a civil rights violation that's somehow curtailing voting. So like that's going to court. So good luck with that. And then the last real piece of this is kind of like what we saw in redistricting, which gives me this like weird glimmer of hope that we had in Indiana Republicans saying when it came to trying to push the fence on redistricting, no. And the same might very well come down to this idea that like a nationalization of voting. It's let me put it this way. When I worked in DC for the National Governors Association, states spent 20 years fighting against the Real ID Act because they didn't want the federal government standardizing licenses driver's licenses from state to state. Some states went as far as passing constitutional amendments to prevent their state from participating in it. That's how angry they were about touching things that belong to state governments. The idea of nationalizing an election in the same way strikes me the same way the Real ID Act. And that fight went on. I mean, I think we're still at a point where I think we're just now, after 20 something years after September 11th, having licenses that just look the same from state to state. So I'm going to put my money on the bureaucracy to jam this one up a little bit. That's my hope.
God hope so. So I want to tackle this next one briefly. Not a whole lot here, but still very important stuff. And I want to move from election conspiracy theories to health conspiracy theories. Now, this week, the FDA quietly took down a webpage warning parents about bogus autism cures. This comes as Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has nominated appointees to the Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee who have promoted such quack treatments and perpetuated the debunked lie that vaccines cause autism. Meanwhile, vaccine skeptic Casey Means has been nominated for Surgeon General. The unlicensed wellness influencer testified Wednesday before a Senate committee echoing RFK's Make America Healthy Again talking points. She refused to fully endorse measles and flu vaccines and said the science proving vaccines don't cause autism is unsettled. Means largely blames the country's high rate of chronic disease on processed foods, poor lifestyle choices, and environmental toxins. She came under fire for failing to disclose her financial interests in products she's promoted. Also on the healthcare front this week, Vice President J.D. Vance and Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Administrator Dr. Oz, God, I can't believe the sentences that come out of my mouth anymore, announced the Trump administration is halting more than $250 million in Medicaid funding to Minnesota to alleged widespread fraud in the state. And this comes after the administration froze child care funding to the state earlier this year. I don't know. Kirsten, what do you make of this? With everything else going on, it's an assault on our mental health. Now they're coming after our physical health as well, it seems.
As a therapist in my profession currently, I've never been more stressed. It's the shortest version of this that I can give. Oh my gosh, there's so much that we can talk about with all of that. But I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is just hypocrisy. Exactly what you said earlier about pushing that our food is poisoning our kids and it's about lifestyles and stuff like that. We're saying that at the same time that we're taking away resources to be able to take care of our families in this way. And I think there needs to be a lot more, sorry, distracted. I think there needs to be a lot more conversations around what's actually helpful for our families and a lot less time spent wasted on things like autism when there are worse things in the world. If autism is our biggest concern, then we're fried.
Number one, autism is not like a disease that you fight like they talk about it as. It is, it's a different way your brain is wired. And David, I mean, if these people actually cared about environmental toxins and stuff, wouldn't they be not deregulating the coal and gas industry? A couple weeks ago, we talked about how they introduce a cute mascot for the coal industry so we can go back to having strip mining. Jeez.
Yeah.
You want to talk about environmental toxins? There you go.
It's bonkers. I mean, and it's just, what a shame we got the wrong Kennedy. I mean, we got the black sheep of the family running HHS, right? I mean, RFK Jr. has done more to damage food safety and public trust and health in this country than botulism ever did. And, and I think, and that's a real challenge. Our public health network, again, like everything else, is a family level, local level activity. And it comes right down to our communities in Indiana. That's why we have to hold public health accountable to expend what little resources we have well. But when you start yanking out confidence in vaccination and food safety and kind of just crackpot ideas about wellness, I mean, we're going to be, again, the re-education of the country, the de-Trumpification of the country is going to have to happen to get us back to safety is real. I mean, outbreaks of measles in my lifetime again. I mean, outbreaks of diseases that we thought we had nearly eradicated controlled through vaccinations are plaguing schools. This is going to. I mean, this is another one of those. Again, the point was to be a wrecking ball. The point was to make space for those deregulation. In Indiana, I think we're down to something like 6,000 coal mining jobs in Indiana. We have 60,000 people employed in green technologies. Like we're all moving this direction, and there's this last gasp to hold on to this nostalgia for a country that it did a lot of harm to us in the 50s and 60s without the regulation. I grew up in Northern Ohio. We used to light rivers on fire here. I mean, like that water shouldn't burn, and I don't want to go back to that at anytime soon. So yeah, I mean, what a mess.
Well, yeah, and
What a mess.
the branding is like "Make America Healthy Again," right? As if like we're going back to some pristine condition like before. There was no regulation then. We were not healthy then. We were more polluted then. Yeah.
If that goes back to Medicare for all and just getting Obamacare back on its feet, I can support that. But Maha only has to go back to 2012. Let's do that again.
Make the Black Death popular again, bringing back the measles. Let's get into the other weird diseases. Hey, speaking of the plague, let's talk about ice. We talked about Minnesota at the end of that last segment. The pretext of widespread fraud perpetuated by the Somali immigrant community was used to justify the surge of ICE agents to Minnesota over the last couple of months. Staying in that state this week, a U.S. district judge issued another civil contempt finding against the government related to violating court orders in immigration cases just days after another Minnesota federal judge found a government lawyer in contempt in another immigration case. Now, in another example of the administration's disregard for the law when it comes to immigration, a whistleblower report revealed Monday that ICE has significantly scaled back training of new agents, despite testimony to the contrary last month by ICE Chief Todd Lyons. Putting the lion in Lyons, right? So new recruits are receiving 250 hours less training than previous classes, with modules on firearms training, constitutional limits on their authority, and protesters' rights cut drastically. Proper training may have prevented a scene like this week's harrowing ordeal experienced by Elmina Agayeva, a Columbia University student who was detained after agents impersonated police and lied their way into her building on false pretense of looking for a missing child. DHS and ICE agents are not allowed on campus without a judicial warrant. Agayeva was released only after the personal intervention of New York Mayor Zoran Mamdani. At least they didn't deport her. If you remember the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Maryland man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador last year, then had phony human smuggling charges leveled against him after his return home. This week, he asked for a federal judge to dismiss those charges, claiming the prosecution is vindictive. Now, another immigrant was not so fortunate as to survive his encounter with ICE agents. Nurul Amin Shah Alam, a Rohingya refugee from Myanmar, was found dead in Buffalo, New York, after agents dropped him off at a closed coffee shop following his release from detention. Alam, nearly blind and speaking no English, was dropped off across town from his home without his family being notified. They put out a missing persons report found for him. His body was found days later. Kirsten, we talked a couple weeks ago in Minnesota, and they drove out Greg Bovino, and they brought in Tom Homan and said, okay, well, we're going to kindler, gentler ICE. It doesn't look like a kindler, gentler ICE, if such a thing can even be possible.
No, I don't think there is ever going to be a thing. Right now, this is an opportunity for our local law enforcement to step up and have the revamp of the century. We are begging them to have the comeback after everything that's gone on with Black Lives Matter and everything that's occurred over the last decade. There's a great opportunity for them to rebrand and represent people and take things like a missing person report seriously and save them. We sheriff candidate here in Hamilton County, John Lowe's, to throw him under the bus, to be very clear, was very proud to be the first sheriff to partner with ICE here in Indiana. And it's completely disgraceful when we should be focusing on taking care of our people and educating them and giving them resources to push back. I know as a social worker, if I've had families I encounter that don't speak English, I try to give them little cards to carry with them. Like, I don't speak this language. I do speak this. I need a translator so that if they are in a situation where they're dropped on the side of the road, they can at least communicate that so far. Right? Because if you're from Burma, that's not a language people are going to pick up.
No. And David, like, I don't know where to begin. Like we talk about the lack of training. They're just hiring guys off the streets. God knows who the hell they're hiring. Some of them are probably Proud Boys. They're just turning them loose. They're deporting people like Kilmar Abrego Garcia, just willy-nilly.
Yeah.
They're kidnapping students from college campuses, and they're leaving disabled folks to die in the elements.
Yeah, we got a taste of this in Trump 1. And so, during the Biden administration, there was a lot of cleanup on this when you think about family reunification at the border and what happened with that. And so it's almost like it's the old line, there's no education in the second kick of a mule here. Like, we already saw what this was. And then the majority of our voters put people back in that did this, and they've come back with like the skills. Like, before it was like clumsy. Now this is, systematic. No, I think the whistleblowing is the most important thing we've learned. And I will, again, I teach Homeland Security at IU. I've been around this topic since September 11th. And, this is where we get into the ethics of national security. At what point do you tip the scales in what's being exploited is fear. And, the worst of the worst program that has been put out by the department to show all the horribleness that they have found accounts for something like 7%, if that. And 93% of the people that are being picked up are not anywhere close to this, or people that have overstayed a visa. They're people are trying to, refugees from other countries trying to make it in America, as we have done for 250 years, to welcome people from all parts of the world and integrate them. Now, at a local law enforcement level, like there are sheriff's candidates and sheriffs that have pushed back on this. There are law enforcement agencies that have pushed back. There are states to push back from this. They're called sanctuary places, despairingly, but the truth is that's federalism at work. And those folks do need to speak up at a local level about not enforcing letters and enforcing bench warrants, because that's the due process part of this. Because the moment a local agency cooperates, they're already violating the civil liberties of the person that under their Fourth Amendment rights. And counties have been sued into the tens of millions of dollars for this. Monroe County in Indiana, we've been told that if non-compliance with Senate Bill 76 is a $10,000 fine to me as an elected official, to our other elected officials. That is nothing compared to the zeros that will be added on if we violate the due process rights of people in our community at the hands of this. I want to go to your question, Scott, though. You said about the training. Yeah, it used to be, to get a security clearance in the United States, you had to take an oath against something called the Smith Act, which said that you were swearing that you never attempted to overthrow the United States of America, our government, as a part of an organization. Well, that's really hard if you're a Proud Boy on January 6th and you were pardoned and you turned around and now you're applying to work at ICE, which has been the case. There are former Proud Boys who are now in uniform, that I don't know how they even get around the Smith Act. And apparently we found out from the whistleblower it's being fast-tracked. And so this training is being, and these are not people trained in law enforcement technique. And no serious person that's been to a police academy can look at these videos and say, oh yeah, that's the way we were trained. We know it's true. So we're in a very dangerous moment here, but that's why you need the transparency, the public interest, the accountability, and the lawyering up to interrogate this the right way. So, I mean, those are just like 50 different thoughts on this, because boy, that's like a whole other show, Scott. You're packing them in today.
Well, hey, listen, I only report what we got going on. They keep the fire hose aimed at us, right? And I want to go ahead and turn the corner here from national news to Indiana news in a segment I call the Crossroads, where those two things intersect. And we're going to stay on the ice beat in that regard. So last week, President Trump told governors he has no plans to surge immigration operations to states where they're not welcomed, but they're still buying up properties across the country, seeking to turn warehouses into massive detention centers. Maryland sued the administration on Monday to prevent the construction of such a facility in their state. Indiana and Governor Mike Braun, however, have proved much more amenable to federal agents operating in the Hoosier state. Protesters marched on the executive mansion last Sunday night to protest ICE activity here. As the New York Times reported, the agency has its eyes on Indianapolis as home to a massive 8,500-person detention facility. Have you guys seen this, Kirsten? I don't know if you saw this report, and there were particularly concerning diagrams I've seen of these, and the way they intend to pack thousands of people into these warehouses, very close quarters. It looks eerily like the same diagrams you would see of slave ships from the 1600s.
It does. And I will keep it quick, but on a similar note, we were able to visit Dachau concentration camp while we were overseas this last December. And while we were there, they were telling us the story while we're standing in this room, right, where people died and, were murdered. And a gentleman from Texas felt it was an appropriate time to tell us that, well, that could never happen in America because Donald Trump is protecting us and our Lord is protecting us and all of that, completely unprompted, right? And I think this is a time where people are beginning to draw those parallels, and whether they want to or not, are seeing that this is something that's going to be impacting Americans. So I think this is a very scary time for people and a horrifying time for immigrants, but there is hope that we are able to move forward from this.
I mean, Jesus, David, at least the Nazis' concentration camps were open air. We're going to pack them in warehouses.
Yeah, I think there's some deep irony that, we've had, Monroe County is one of several counties in the state that have been sued by the ACLU for constitutional care, which requires a certain amount of things like space for inmates, overcrowding, area for recreation programming. And the designs of these federal spaces don't even reflect that. And so, as a county that's been wrestling with how to, a county of good people like mine, and we are trying to do the right thing here under a lawsuit with an agency or an organization that usually partners with us against the world in Monroe County. To see things like that could be going on at Speedway or other parts of the state is just the cognitive dissonance is a little too much for me, and I'm used to it. It is remarkable, what happens outside of Monroe County's borders sometimes in the state, and that impact with, I guess, the reality of people in our state that can look past this on a Sunday during Lent. I got to go back to it because, I mean, this is a high season for folks, and it's like whatever's going on in church today. I hope they take that lesson into Monday when they find people complaining about this podcast today.
So, I guess sticking on the ice front, but moving to Todd Rokita away from Mike Braun. Rokita sued Indianapolis Public Schools, and in response, they adopted a new student privacy policy ensuring uniform protocol across the district within the bounds of applicable law. He sued over their website, which had resources for undocumented students, a section that has since been removed, as well as IPS guidance on what to do if federal agents showed up on school grounds. The Attorney General says both documents violated state law that prohibits government entities from obstructing immigration enforcement. Now, sticking with Rokita, but looking at another intersection of U.S. news with Indiana news, the AG this week touted his success recouping $100 million from Medicaid fraud cases. It should be noted that this fraud is largely due to overbilling by providers, not any wrongdoing by recipients. If you want to tie that back into the Minnesota story and this whole Somali fraud hoax that they perpetuated to send ICE agents there. Kirsten, I guess final thoughts from you on this intersection of Indiana news with U.S. news.
Yeah, I think this is a great time for our community leaders to be able to step in and advocate for people who clearly can't advocate for themselves because it would put them in an unsafe area. Todd Rokita is an embarrassment to be a part of the state of Indiana, but this is giving us all an opportunity to reflect and look at the processes and how we can improve them.
David,
when I worked in Washington D.C. at the National Governors Association, we used to refer to AGs as aspiring governors, and he's been at this for a long time. And so the bottom line is, he's a charlatan that has turned our Attorney General's office into a factory for conjuring up conspiracy and tilting at windmills. It's like Todd Quixote, and we have to kind of ignore some of this. But at the same time, I don't blame public schools for trying to, they have to comply because they don't have the resource to fight back, but it's really on other elected officials that have the capital and the resource to fight back to do so and to start to say it quite loudly, because it turns out when you do take it to court, a lot of this stuff does shatter on impact. And this is a guy, again, who has been sanctioned so many times by the bar in our state for his malfeasance and his behavior. But he has been a bluster machine for 25 years in the state. He's not going away. but it'd be very nice if we can work really hard to make sure he goes away, because at some point you gotta wonder. It feels like a lot of projection with guys like this, and I would just set a clock on the day we find out that what's going on in that Hummer he drives around the state. So I'm not. I'm just. It's again. Don't get distracted by the noise. Stick to the knitting with this guy. It's just. It's like another Christopher Hitchens quote. If you gave the guy an enema, you could bury him in a matchbox. That's what we're dealing with Todd Rokita.
The guy has got to have skeletons in his closet stacked deep with the amount of projection going on. We can only begin to speculate. Now, I want to change gears a little bit, but stick with Rokita here. So, he also, excuse me, I'm sorry. We talked about Rokita and the Medicaid fraud, right? Well, I want to look at another state agency investigating abuse by providers. This time, the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission is looking into the state's 5 largest utility providers. The commission and new chair Andy Zay are calling the utilities in for a public hearing this month to explain Hoosiers' ballooning electric bills, which increased 17% on average last year. Now, one of the culprits may be the that's a tough word. Proliferation of power-hungry data centers, which continue to pop up across the state. Tuesday, Hoosier Action convened a hearing at the Indiana State Library where a packed room demanded legislators regulate the booming industry. Data centers' massive demand for power drives up wholesale market prices and forces utilities to expand infrastructure, the costs of which are often passed on to consumers. Kirsten, I bet the data center issue is one that you hear a lot about.
I knew nothing about data centers before this year. And now I think it is a topic of conversation every single day. You are absolutely correct. There are consistent town halls. There are people going to their city council meetings now to push back against it. Like in our district, we have, I think, at least 2 major areas where data centers are being considered, one of them which being Kokomo. And so this is a huge topic of conversations because the communities are demanding that they be at the table now and it not just be something that's pushed onto them. Similar to ICE just opening an office in Carmel and state people and city people not being notified, there are a lot of things being done behind closed doors that are concerning. And I think we're demanding transparency at this point, because why isn't that a basic decency when we're paying tax dollars and being affected by this?
Well, and David, one of the big concerns with these data centers, there's many concerns. In addition to the power usage, in addition to the water usage, there's the tax abatement issue. It's like, okay, you want to come into our communities, I guess, fine, but what benefit do these communities even get from a lot of these things if they're not paying their taxes?
Yeah, not much at all. And I think that's where we're starting to see the gambit. Look, I'm on the Monroe County Council. Tax abatements are something we do here. And there are so many problems with this, not least of which is that, dumping a 200,000 square foot concrete pad on what used to be agricultural land means that when we go to eventually have to remediate that, and when the sugar rush of data centers runs out and these become just giant boxes along the highway, like what's next for that property? What's the 50-year version of that property? I grew up in the Rust Belt.
Ice concentration
Northern
camp.
Ohio is littered with old factories. Well, oh my gosh, but there's something going on there with that. One thing, Monroe County Democrats don't agree on a lot lately, but one of the things we do is on data centers and modular nuclear power, because the other piece of this is the bait and switch of saying, well, if we're raising the conventional utility prices, the way to get around that is to let the data centers build their own nukes inside the thing to run the things, and so now we're compounding problems by adding in more environmental degradation and damage. The truth is, if I had a 200,000 square foot building in Monroe County, I hope that there were 1,000 people working in that building, living in my county, earning high paying jobs. When you build these spaces, they employ very few people and they consume a lot of space. And you might get that tax bump or something like some incentivizing to build there, but give it 20 years and these guys that are putting them in like hotcakes are going to be really regretting this down the road. That takes some vision to understand that and make sure you're electing people that have the 20-year vision going on here. I don't see a lot of good roads ending with this, but again, Mike Braun wasn't in it for the long term. We all knew that.
Kirsten, like I tell people, like, I use a little bit of AI. I like to help it helps me like make show notes after the fact, so I don't have to go back and listen to my entire show all over again. I use Claude, by the way, the I guess least problematic of them, as we discussed earlier in the show. But there is a way to do these that benefits the community. Number one, limit the tax abatements, right? You can, they should pay their taxes. Number two, they should be self-sustaining and be able to produce their own power. Hopefully renewable energy. Listen, I'm not anti-nuclear reflexively, but we have to make sure these things are safe. The small nuclear modular reactor thing is unproven technology. And then there's the water issue. They're in Europe, these data centers have to use closed loop cooling systems. Here, we're talking in the one that they want to put in Boone County. They want to draw the water out of Eagle Creek and use it and then dump the wastewater back in. I mean, what are we doing here?
I think we're doing what billionaires have always wanted to do. We are drawing every little bit of energy and dollars out of our communities. This isn't a goal of trying to make things better, provide jobs, or anything like that. And you can paint it any way that you want. But at the end of the day, it's disastrous for the economy, for people, for the landscape that we live in. And I think that the class that is perpetuating this, the Epstein class, they are forgetting that those dollars won't matter when we're all dead. When we cannot live on this earth, it won't matter anymore. And I just really hope that that's something the community is taking to heart.
Well,
I
mean,
chuckle
David,
because
they probably just think there's too many of us. I think they want us dead, don't they?
I just chuckle because Musk doesn't want to live on this earth. He wants to live on Mars. So, I mean, that's it's like a whole other thing.
I'm in favor of Elon Musk living on Mars. We should send him right now.
You can have it, the whole thing.
Yep.
Oh, all right. So let's turn to the State House. We talked about this this Hoosier Action data center event at the State Library. Well, down the street at the State House, electric utility affordability was one of the House Republicans' priority bills this session at the General Assembly. The legislature adjourned on Friday, and for more complete coverage, you can check out the episode I did yesterday with Katie Rector, the Director of Advocacy from Mad Voters, where we did a full hour recapping what went down this session of the legislature. We'll get into it a little bit here now together, though. So on the electric affordability issue, House Bill 1002 sought to make utility bills more affordable, and it did some good things, passing nearly unanimously, though the GOP repeatedly shot down Democratic amendments that could have really helped consumers. House Bill 1001, their other top priority, also passed. This one seeks to increase the supply of affordable housing, largely by reducing local regulatory control. The Senate's top priority also passed. This one on a party line vote, however. This legislation perpetuates the widespread fraud narrative regarding public services like SNAP and Medicaid. Any expected savings are largely going to be due to deserving Hoosiers being ensnared by bureaucratic red tape. And Kirsten, I want to ask you, I guess, as somebody who's looking to join this august body, what you thought of the priority bills from the GOP this session, whether you want to look at the housing issue or the electric utility issue or this public services issue, which I assume is probably a little bit more in your purview there.
Yeah, I think all of them go into the same category of there's a complete disenfranchisement from the people who are currently in office and the people who are living in our communities. During my last practicum, I was at the IU Free Clinic in Indianapolis, and people are coming in and saying they can't afford insulin, they can't afford food, and they're losing their benefits, and they don't even understand why. There's a complete lack of education and transparency across the board. Meanwhile, Republicans are worried about what bathroom people are using, and we've seen that in our bills this session as well. And I am just struggling to wrap my head around what the reasoning would be outside of fraud going on in the back end, because realistically, they don't care about people surviving or having a good quality of life. They don't care about working families having access to means to be able to continue to provide for the future. They just care about the dollars that are going into their pockets. And this has been adamantly clear despite whatever rhetoric is being pushed out of the State House.
And especially on this Medicaid and SNAP thing,
Yeah.
that the party of small government is introducing more bureaucratic hurdles. I thought these were the guys that came in and wanted to cut
Yes.
red tape, right?
Well, yeah.
Yes. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Yeah. Sorry. No, go ahead.
Sorry. It's,
Kirsten, go ahead and finish that because I want to ask David about the housing thing.
yeah, exactly that. At the same time that we're trying to give more power to the federal government and to the state government in regards to law enforcement and our healthcare and things like that, we're saying that we want small government. It's just backwards. It's complete fallacies.
Yeah. Home rule is for other people.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's got an asterisk, and yeah, anytime it's home rule unless otherwise directed, and it's directed a lot.
Well, so David, along those lines, I guess the thing, as a county council member and an aspiring county commissioner, the local like housing regulations and building codes and stuff is sort of a thing that you have to deal with. This bill that seeks to improve housing affordability, which a worthwhile goal, is this bill as it passed, and both of these, in fact, all of the three we mentioned, are still awaiting the governor's signature. They are not yet law, but is this removing local control for building codes? I know we're a little bit more stringent here than in other parts of the state.
There's some this is a sticky wicket, and part of it is and I say that carefully because part of this is that there are some ups and downs here. This is in some ways a generational argument more than a political argument. There are multiple generations of Hoosiers coming up that have never been able to get into housing attainment at all, and counties that are regulating in a way that are foreclosing opportunities for development or ways to develop different housing forms that really meet the current market. It creates some challenges. Monroe County has sort of a family debate going on about environmentalism. There's people that learned on Earth Day 1970 that the population of the world's too big, so make your population as small as you can. And therefore don't bring people to Bloomington or Monroe County. We're done. We're full. There are others that have said, look, density is the answer, and if you can infill and get people living closer together, they won't be putting millions of pounds of carbon into the air a year in our community. And so the fact that we have to sort of have these audibles where it's like, well, the Republican amendment here was okay because it helped to free up opportunities that were too restrictive, and then to say, well, that other Republican amendment is just absolute destruction of our environment. It means that like we have a lot of cooks in this kitchen. And if the smart approach would be for the state and county associations to sit down and come up with like a better fit, but up is down and down is up on this stuff when it comes to housing itself. There are so many other things in the state house that I'm sure you can get to, and I don't know if you want to get into the criminalization of homelessness, which is really the thing that's going to harm Monroe County the most. Is this idea that of the I think given 5,000 people on a day that experience homelessness in the state of Indiana, like 1 in 10 of them are in Bloomington and Monroe County. And the idea that we're going to fill our jail with people that are experiencing homelessness because that making it a crime, and overfilling our jails is just feeding the jail industrial complex, which is one of the things the governor draws on for his donor base. And so, man, Scott, it's impossible to do the state house in 90 seconds. But if you got a specific one, I'll take a shot at it.
Well, let's dig into the state house here a little bit more.
Yeah.
So, I guess let's look at the good first. There were some good things that happened. For example, House Bill 1036 requires the DCS to conduct in-person assessments of before closing an investigation into children in need of services. There was a House Bill 1177 expanded the employer tax credit to incentivize more businesses to provide child care benefits. It also opened up TIF funding for child care. But most of the good involved bad bills failing to pass. For example, this bill criminalizing the possession and distribution of abortion medication and would have introduced a Texas-style bounty system failed. Another bill that would have essentially erased trans and non-binary Hoosiers' legal recognition failed, though I should note an executive order preventing the BMV from issuing gender-affirming IDs was put into effect earlier this year. Several attempts to smuggle the 10 Commandments into the public schools also failed, as did language that would have reduced early voting from 28 days to 16 days. I think Kirsten mentioned that earlier. One good thing, another good thing that did pass was the state's needle exchange program was extended for 5 years to 2031. This has helped reduce the spread of HIV and hepatitis. You know, we had a big outbreak of that down in Scott County a few years ago. So I guess, Kirsten, pick one of the good ones and expound.
So the very first one you said is something that's of particular interest to me as a former DCS caseworker. So one of the good ones is that caseworkers are required to meet with the families, right? But can we just talk about how that's a load of bull? Because it is a good thing, right? That is something, but that's already been in policy. So it is an example of something being made legislature to show, look, we care about kids, we're doing our jobs, when in reality, that's already being required. It's not something that's new. It's not something that's really adding any value to our state. It's saying, look, we care about our families, when in the end, we're not giving funding to support these families. DCS is consistently getting rid of positions that provide support to families. They cut their contract with IU to limit training without putting up any sort of new training for people. IU was their biggest contractor. They had multiple floors and buildings to be able to give training to FCMs. But we've cut back on that. We've cut back on aid that we're giving to families. But look, they have to go see the kids, even though that's already the law. It's ridiculous. It's just embarrassing. Sorry, I know that wasn't a good positive take, but
it's hard because it's like celebrating a losing season. Like, hey, we won too, right? And that's what's really hard when we expect Bloomington nowadays. And so, it's there's something to that. Though I got to say, the sports metaphors used by my own party to describe things up north are not necessarily satisfying either. I think the one that maybe we didn't mention, as Scott reminded me, I do believe the bill that would have recruited legislators to participate in firing squads for death penalty, that also didn't go through, but just barely did not get out of the committee, if I remember right.
That applied pretty early in the process. I understand.
Yeah, but still, that was... but I think it was like a 1 vote margin in committee, which tells you that that tells you a lot, actually. I think it's hard to find silver linings. Thank goodness some things failed, but as we know, some things always come back with a vengeance. And really, that's why we're in a season of midterm, and it's important for folks like Kirsten running and others running. And I sound like an old party boss again. We got to get that message out, because for every vote Dave Hall in Bloomington skipped to try to avoid being held accountable, he took some really ridiculous votes, and I hope people in my community remind him of his vote on Senate Bill 76. You can skip the ones that sound like minutia, but when you've empowered or you're trying to empower harm to our community and our refugees in our community and our immigrants in our community, I think people in Monroe County got to remember that in November.
And I want to focus on 182 there, the trans erasure bill, which again, positive development that thing did not go through.
Yeah.
But I want us to not spike the football and celebrate victory too soon. Continuing the sports metaphor, David, because like we said, the BMV issued that executive order at was fulfilling that executive order by Mike Braun,
right?
Which makes so that you cannot have a gender affirming state ID issued. And I want to look at Kansas this week, where they basically invalidated every such ID that had been issued. And so every trans Kansan who had a proper ID is now essentially driving illegally until they go back and I want to say rectified, but rectify is not the right word, because they're essentially being forced into a state ID that does not match their gender identity. But the way ALEC works and the right-wing Bill Mill machine, Hoosier lawmakers are going to get ideas, and you have to watch out for things like that coming this week. So
can I share how that happened? Well, like there was a...
Please.
Go ahead.
Please.
Let me tell you how that plays. Here's how it plays out at a hyper local level. I did forget about the executive order, and I'm glad you brought it up. So, do local governments roll over, or do they try to push back is really the question. And so in Monroe County, our health department was getting mixed information from the state about whether or not to issue birth certificates with the correct assignment for that person. And we had to actually like have a bit of an intervention locally to say, like, I don't know what the state's doing. I don't care what the executive order says. In our county, we're still going to process these. And if it hits a wall, let it be the wall up there. We're not going to like be partners in like just rolling over and shutting down on these things. I think it goes back to even the assaults on DEI programming in communities. Like it's don't roll over before you're forced into court. Maybe take it to court, because I don't know. I mean, we're talking civil rights here, and so the fact that we have executive orders of BMV is interesting. And again, those are state agencies operating in our communities. But if you're getting documentation from a county government, I think good elected officials, good parties should be just making sure, like, you make it as, that's what resistance is, right? You make it as difficult as possible to do the harm. And a few of us, and government, we're focused on that locally. Our local health board does it, would still try to find a way to issue documentation, even though it can't be processed at State Department of Health. Our local judges have signed those orders as long as they can. And there's some tragic stories in there. So, gosh, I mean, that's the complicit silence is complicity piece, right? When it comes to this kind of stuff. And even elected
What does
officials have
Timothy Snyder
have that
say about
mindset.
obeying in advance,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay,
This
wait,
this is
we
real
talked
life. Yeah. This is, yeah.
Sorry, David, if I talk over you. There's a little bit of lag on your end, but we'll work our way through it. So we talked about some of the good stuff, a lot of bad stuff this legislative session, as our Republican supermajority is wont to do. They passed a massive environmental deregulation bill, as if our air and water quality weren't already bad enough. They passed a provision that would essentially strip Marion County, that's Indianapolis, of the ability to select their own judges. This thing reeks of racism and paternalism. We talked about Mike Braun and his military police force. That's House Bill 1343, which would grant police powers to the National Guard and allow the governor to deploy his troops anywhere in the state for any reason. Essentially, the state also basically codified a takeover of Indianapolis public schools. They really hate the majority minority population in the state capital. We talked about Senate Bill 1 already. David mentioned Senate Bill 76. This is the one that Dave Hall voted for, even though he likes to pretend to be a moderate sometimes. This one passed along party lines and mandates that all public entities comply with ICE. There were a couple other ones involving schools that would insert Christian nationalism into the curriculum, things about waiting until marriage to have children as part of being a good citizen. Also, maybe allowing a backdoor for organizations like Turning Point USA to be allowed into our schools the same way, say, the Boy Scouts are. And then finally, David did also mention Senate Bill 285, which would essentially criminalize homelessness. So I guess, Kirsten, if you would like to take one of those bad bills and expound upon it.
Let's go with the last one, because that's the one I would have the most experience with, of it being illegal to be homeless. How can we justify something like that while at the same time taking away resources from the communities that are serving these people? There was a fire this year that unfortunately closed one of the homeless shelters in Indianapolis, and that had a profound impact because no matter how many beds that has, they're still not available. While I was with the clinic downtown in Indianapolis, it was always an amazing day when we got a tent or I had blankets. You would not believe how much of a hot commodity it would be just to get a can of Spam. So these people who already are just fighting to be able to stay warm, get protein, they're now being fined and put in jails. When I was talking to the Howard County Sheriff, I asked him, as a Republican, as somebody who's been in office for several years, what is your biggest concern? And he said the amount of time that we spend on people who are in our jails because they don't have resources, because they're homeless, because they have mental health concerns. Every sheriff that has been willing to speak with me, every law enforcement agency that's been willing to speak with me has said our jails are already the largest mental health provider while they have one or two social workers, if that. I mean, Howard County doesn't even have a nurse on staff 24 hours a day, so people will just continue to die in their jail. But we somehow have the resources to now jail these people, even outside of the human rights side of things. Economically, it doesn't make sense. It's just a harmful bill. There's no bright side to it.
My favorite part of the bill is that we're going to fine people $500 for being homeless. As like if you got $500, you wouldn't be in this situation. David, I don't know which you already mentioned 285. Does any of the other ones really stand out to you as particularly egregious this session?
Yeah, again, I mean, it's our local version of the spread, right? It's like Steve Bannon at the Hoosier Steve Bannon version of this, and it's not any one particular person. It's the whole enterprise that has a 25-year lead time on, I think, good working people in our state, working class people, moderates, independents, progressives, Democrats. And so it's hard. I mean, because I just look at it as the totality. Like, what does it mean for my county when we're going to see the overburdening of our criminal justice system, our social service, our social safety net? What does it mean to continue to dehumanize people in state code, and not try to solve problems, but like actually create worse ones, because there's just hard line ideas about what it is to invest in prevention and substance abuse prevention and restorative justice. And and if we can't be those advocates even within our own party, when like there's him hawing about like, do we or don't we cooperate with agencies that are harming people? Do we or don't we put those dollars in at the front end rather than trying to put out trash fires? Or do we invest in housing forms that get people into this structure? Because we know that so much of our mental health, our health is involved in basic needs. Do you have a roof over your head? Can you eat today? If we're not, I mean, so I have to address all of it with that attitude and mindset rather than trying to pinpoint things. I know that's like a roundup answer, but like, it's just like all of it goes back to root cause of, why did you run for office up there? Like, what was the end goal for you? Was it really just to, have the title and like lord over your little fiefdom? I mean, we're in weird times. But I'm going to look for those people that are running, that are trying to turn a corner on this and saying, how are we helping instead of how are we harming? And that's really the question everybody should be asking in the primary, in the general election, and the years beyond. It's just, I mean, I hate that it has to break this badly before people notice, but I don't know if it's broken badly enough. Like at
Yeah, well,
what point that 50
it's
says we're ready for a change around here,
it's even if you're incredibly cynical, right, and you're a small government conservative, quote unquote, you mentioned the upstream effects, right? You spoke about this really powerfully at the Bloomington DSA candidate forum here on Thursday, in regards to our jail situation here. Well, people wind up in the jail, and we spend money on that downstream instead of spending upstream that could have alleviated these problems. And you know what? Turns out, Kirsten, it's usually cheaper to tackle things up ahead.
God. Oh my God, yeah. That's one of the platforms that I'm running on. The second component, because it always comes in threes, right, is prevention over crisis services. It is so much cheaper to just give people what they need. We spend so much money wasted on politics and things like that. I mean, we're giving hundreds of thousands of dollars into elections that could be spent on the people. And we're giving all of these tax breaks to corporations when we could just be funding things. So like here in Hamilton County, our hospitals have made deals with our providers here, as limited as they are, that they will work to give services ahead of time. So like Westfield Fire Department, they have a program where they work with high 911 utilizers to try and get them preventative services, because it saves IU hospitals hundreds of thousands of dollars per person. I mean, it's just common sense.
Yeah, well, Kirsten, you mentioned the tax breaks and the giveaways, right, to the corporations. One organization that bipartisan lawmakers agreed to at the State House this year to give the farm away to was the Chicago Bears. and the state created this Northwest Indiana Stadium Authority. The Bears are exploring building a dome stadium in Hammond. Listen, I'm a Bears fan. I think dome stadiums in general are an abomination. Men play football outdoors in the weather. But furthermore, David, these things never, ever pay off.
No, they do not. I think there was a book written about 20 years ago that said the only city in America that somehow managed to get a positive and money back was like New Haven, Connecticut for like a minor league hockey team. And there's variables there I'm sure none of us understand. Yeah, it's the sugar rush of the NFL. I mean, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. They're going through a similar debate right now about getting a dome stadium here, which is sacrilege. Yeah, I agree. I also was born in Pittsburgh. That's where my loyalties are, and those folks play outside, but that's a long story. And I got to laugh about Northwest Indiana. I mean, I know Mayor McDermott, and I know that folks are very excited up there, but, I'm reminded of Gene Shepherd in A Christmas Story, where the old man was saying at the table, like terror of the Midway, more like the Chicago Chipmunks. I mean, now we've got the Hammond Hamsters. Maybe it's the Hammond Hamsters. I was hoping for the Gary Bears for Mayor Melton, but, but that didn't happen. But, I mean, that's again, I think in some ways it's the bread and circuses version of our politics, right? I mean, you can get away with a lot of murder in the state house if you're like, oh, let's talk football, let's talk another franchise. And while I'm not sure, I mean, I'm sure there's some numbers and models on what kind of economic benefit happened there. I've also seen again when go to St. Louis, where the St. Louis Rams used to play, and that stadium has been sitting weird for a long time. So this is going to get interesting. But the NFL stopped being a nonprofit association, which is an amazing thing to say, over a decade ago. And of course, college football nowadays doesn't really look like the old student athlete version of that. And so, sports politics are bread and circuses. I mean, yeah, it's exciting. I got to say that playoff round for the Bears was really fascinating. I became a Bears fan at the end of the season this year, but in Chicago. Perhaps
we're being used, David. I do not think the stadium's going to happen up there. I think Indiana's being used as leverage for the Bears to extract more concessions from Illinois. Unfortunately,
Pritzker Arena sounds really good, doesn't it? I'm joking. I'm joking. Blah blah blah. I didn't say that anyway.
So one last thing at the State House that I did want to talk about this week. So one thing that got snuck in there was lawmakers are looking to give themselves some more say over big ticket highway projects, and this was snuck in to this Bears bill. It was added, and so the legislature would have to have a final say over any project costing at least $250 million. And one of these said projects is Mike Braun's pet Mid-States Corridor plan, a proposed 54-mile highway route that would connect Interstates 64 and 69. And it would roughly follow the current US 231, much of which bypasses Braun's hometown of Jasper, and as well as nearby Huntington and Lagodi. Now, Jim Pressel, the House Roads and Transportation Committee chair, said the latest cost estimates put this total project at more than $3 billion, which includes about $1.2 billion in Du Bois County, which includes Jasper. Now, I think the criticism is maybe that Braun just wants to get home faster, as if he doesn't already have a state-funded helicopter, but that's neither here nor there. But the people do not want this bill, or the people do not want this built at all. Now, we saw along those lines, and this is from Politico this week, and this will be our final story this week, Governor Braun, according to a recent poll from Public Policy Polling and published in Politico, gave the governor a 25% approval rating. The Mid-States Corridor in his home county is supported by something like 11% of the population. Nobody wants this thing. We would have to postpone road and bridge projects elsewhere that are desperately needed. That money, Braun wants to reapportion it for his particular area of the state. Again, the people there don't want it. So I guess let's have a little fun at the governor's expense, his 25% approval rating. Kirsten, what is more popular than Mike Braun? I'm going to go with wet socks are more popular than Mike Braun.
Ooh, that is a good one. I think I'm going to go with cat food for dinner, since that's the reality some of our people face.
Wow,
And
that's right to the jugular. I mean, how do I beat that? I was going to say, a Boilermaker in Bloomington. I'd much rather wear a Purdue hat on Kirkwood at this point. That'd be it. Goodness.
So, go ahead. Oh, okay. I thought you had more. So, I guess. Listen, we're only, like a year into his term, though. I guess, given Indiana's typical heavy Republican lean, Kirsten, is he in danger of re-election in 2028? Is he even going to run again? He's kind of old to begin with.
I think it's really interesting to even think about, because as Trump's pet, he does get a lot of things provided to him, right? He has funding and things like that. But at the end of the day, popularity is what it's going to be. And 25% in our state it's saying something. When I was at the redistricting hearing in, I think it was December or January, it all blends together at this point. One of our Republican senators made a comment that if Indiana was fair, there would be 40% of our Senate would be Democrats. But when you can't even win, when you have bought the stadium, you own the merch, and you get all of the things that are provided to you, staying with sports analogies, where do you go from there? I don't know why he would waste his time.
Well,
David, it turned into lots of sports metaphors today. I didn't even have this mapped out. What do you got?
It has, and I may venture into one again. But one of the things you got to remember about the Indiana Republican gubernatorial primary back in 24, and I had to look it up to make sure. I mean, it was like 1, 2, 3, there was like 6 people in that thing. And so,
It was a clown car.
And he just happened to be the guy that popped out of the clown car, right? And so, and then go back farther. I mean, Eric Holcomb ended up an accidental governor, right? Because if you remember, Mike Pence was running for re-election and got saved from the ash heap of history by Donald Trump as the vice president, because John Gregg was on his way to defeating Pence. And so Holcomb, it was just central casting Republican, just throw an R on there, and he still managed to pull off a win. Braun might be bringing the whole enterprise down with him, and it's not like everyone's favorite Reverend Micah Beckwith it was right behind him, ready to get the lieutenant governor, waiting to come in there. That I don't think that vote. I don't think he's got a better approval rating in that respect. But the thing you got to remember is the Republican Party has built a deep bench over 25 years, and in Indiana, the Democratic Party has done none of that. I'm an endangered species as a county elected Democrat in the state of Indiana. Of the 92 Indiana counties, like we have 63 elected Democrats in Monroe County. There's a lot of elected Democrats in Marion, but you can count on one hand where all the bench is. At the county level, you have folks like Kirsten trying to run for state senate, and what we're talking 10 state senators, right? They're Democrats. Like, our bench is so thin compared, they can pluck anyone off and find some. I mean, there's a whole lot of Republicans that I don't want to say are better than Braun, but maybe they have better approval rating or polling than Braun. And so this is a generational project, and it's one that good Democrats should be asking hard questions to their district and state party leadership about. Like, what's the 10-year vision, folks? Because 22, he could fall into it again, or any of them can fall into it again, or I don't know. Let's just start naming names: Todd Rokita, Jim Lucas. Like, how scary do you want to get? It's not even Halloween yet, but that's it.
Yeah. Well, and boy, you mentioned Holcomb. As Indiana Republicans go, he was not bad. Braun is certainly more extreme. Pence was certainly more extreme as a Christian nationalist. You mentioned Rokita, another religious extremist out there, and oh my God, Beckwith. Kirsten, what's it going to take for the Republican brand to be sufficiently tainted in Indiana that Democrats can take some sort of foothold in the legislature or even in the governor's office?
I think right now it's going to take the Democratic Party being brave and shutting down any ideas that they are like the central party at this point, because at the end of the day, the Democratic Party is still right-leaning as a whole. If we look at the grand scheme of the world, that is very much the direction that I feel a lot of Democrats are. I think it's going to take a lot of bravery from the Democratic Party to back progressive candidates and to allow them to really speak about the issues and dive into it. And instead of saying, always vote blue, always go that way, I think it's going to take a lot of reflection on our half to look at where we're failing, where we can do better, where we can really impact the communities to gain that trust.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you said that, because I've argue this all the time. This is what I spend most of my time talking about in this space, is that if running to the center, if trying to be moderate and trying to pick off a handful of country club Republicans in Hamilton County was electorally viable for Democrats in Indiana, it would have worked by now. We've got to try something different and try a more progressive direction. And that's why I'm glad folks like you are out there running for office this year. So let's go ahead and wrap it up. On that note, why don't you tell people where they can find you and how they can help your campaign?
Absolutely. You can find me at my website, rootforindiana.org. I am on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. I think all of them are Root for Indiana at this point. Donor dollars always help. I am not accepting any money from any corporations or any PACs that I feel don't support my mission. I'm a social worker, so I cannot be self-funded, unfortunately.
And it's, again, with another sports metaphor, Root for Indiana? That's great.
I got so lucky when I got married.
It's an awesome campaign sign. I mean, that is so good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for having me back on. I look forward to round 4 at some point in the future. But folks in Monroe County and across the state can find me at votedavidhenry.com. We have a once in a generation opening on our county commission seat, which has put us into a bit of a contested primary among friends in my county. But the truth is, we have some urgency to get some stuff done to protect ourselves from the rest of our state. And I think all of us are expecting a lot more out of our party locally and out of our county locally. And so that's why I'm in the mix. So you can find me at, again, votedavidhenry.com. I'm working on housing solutions, job diversity, protecting our people from Todd Rokita, and really getting some stuff done in our community. But thank you very much for having me on today.
Thank you guys so much for being here. And folks, I will be back tonight at 7 p.m. We're doing another Progressive Indiana Network virtual town hall. Brad Meyer is back for his second one this evening. So folks, in the 9th district here, we especially want to hear from you. Get your questions. That is 7 p.m. tonight in many of these same fine internet places. Also, Derek Holder with Progressive Indiana Network and the Hold 'em Accountable podcast is doing phenomenal work. He's putting out like 3 candidate interviews a week, getting folks on the record. Monday, he will have District 46 Senate candidate Cliff Marsiglio. Then Wednesday, he will have State House District, I want to say 48 candidate Carl Stutzman from up in the Elkhart area. I will be back Wednesday night for another live. My guest will be State House 11 District candidate Tyler Bridges. We're also, for folks who haven't been listening, carrying our friends at Concerned Clergy of Indianapolis. They do a weekly radio show. We're covering that. We're distributing that as a podcast. That is available every Thursday morning. Again, please subscribe over at progressiveindiana.net. We could really use your help. Follow us on social media at Progressive Indiana Network on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at the same handle. Over on Blue Sky and TikTok, you can find us at PIN Indiana. Now, me personally, you can find me on most of your social media sites at HoosLeft. Send me a DM, any of them, with feedback, tips, ideas, and concerns. You can email me personally at scott@whosleft. Finally, share our work with a friend and have them pass it on to another Indiana progressive. I know we're out there. Let's keep building this project and a truly democratic state, one conversation at a time. Until the next one, thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, David. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Have a great Sunday afternoon, Indiana.